Is there anything else you'd like to say directly to Laura Bates if she ever watches this?
Wow. I would hope you would do yourself the service of reading The Myth of Male Power or the Boy Crisis book. Read the Boy Crisis book. See how, if you became a mother of a son, what the messages are that we're giving to our sons are messages that you don't want your son to be having as someone that you love and that you would like to protect from having an awful life experience. Laura, we're all in the same family boat. When only one sex wins, we both lose.
This video is part of a series where I will be fact-checking a number of claims that Laura Bates has made about the men's human rights movement in her book, Men Who Hate Women. And to do this most effectively, I will be taking the time to talk to some of the people that Laura Bates repeatedly talks about in a manner that I would describe as wholly inconsistent with at least 9 of the 12 National Union of Journalists' core principles. In this episode, I'm delighted to be talking with Dr. Warren Farrell, who is an American political scientist, activist, and the author of 7 books on issues impacting on men and women. Dr. Farrell has been chosen by the Financial Times as one of the world's top 100 thought leaders and is recognised as a pioneer in both the women's and men's equality and human rights movements. He's the only man to have been elected onto the board of directors of the American National Organization for Women 3 times, and more recently GQ magazine described him as the Martin Luther King of the men's movement. His books have been published in over 50 countries and in 19 languages. They include the New York Times bestseller Why Men Are the Way They Are, and international bestsellers such as The Myth of Male Power and The Boy Crisis, which was co-authored with John Gray in 2018. I reached out to Dr. Farrell to seek his views on feminist writer Laura Bates's latest book, Men Who Hate Women, which was recently described by Gloria Steinem as a book that shows us no less than the path to both intimate and global survival. And anyone who has read her manifesto will have hardly failed to have noticed that she clearly views Dr. Farrell as patient zero in an apparent global pandemic of misogyny. So to begin, I asked Dr. Farrell to respond to that claim, and more broadly the claim that he is vicariously responsible for the waves of misogyny said to be currently pouring out of the internet.
From my perspective, here's the actual facts. I was on the board of directors of the National Organization for Women in New York City back in the early 70s and spoke around the world, I suppose, as the leading male feminist. My goal always was, and I believe always will be, to support women's options being as great as they can possibly be, to honor women, to respect women, and at the same time to honor and respect boys and men as well, and to understand the problems that women are facing and the problems that men are facing. The difference between me and the feminist movement as we've grown probably is best expressed in Helen Reddy's song, I am woman, I am strong. And now recently, the feminist movement has been focused on I am woman, I've been wronged, I am victim, and honing victimhood is a fine art. I don't feel that that is respecting women, because I remember in the old days, in the early 70s, when I was doing a lot of TV shows, I would often be debating male chauvinist type people. And they would be saying, oh, you can't have women in the workplace. They'll constantly be complaining. If you say the wrong, men, we joke back and forth and we criticize each other. We exchange with covered put downs. And when we do, we all recognize that this is part of our, that people joke with us and put us down. Men do to other men, when we respect them enough to feel that they can handle it. And in fact, it's part of the testing grounds to see if they can, whether they're going to respond in a defensive type of way, or whether they're going to laugh and play with it, and we'll all play together. And male chauvinists would say, you know, oh, women won't be able to do that. You tell a woman she looks nice in her dress and she's going to sort of be, oh, you know, you're coming on to me. And you know, I would say women are, you know, more thoughtful than that. They can make distinctions that, you know, that along those lines. And now, when I am speaking to corporate executives, top-level CEOs, they are all saying to me, Warren, please do not quote me as saying this, but, and this is every single one out of only 11, but nevertheless 11 or 12 that I've spoken to say, you know, I have always been a champion of women in our company. I've always been a champion of having the best people, and the best people are often women. And so I figure if other people don't recognize that and they're sexist, more opportunities for me to get the best women. And I would be very happy to mentor them, you know, and so, but now I have a wife and I have kids. And if I mentor a woman and she doesn't get as far as she would like to, as fast as she would like to, and she feels like I've in some way held her back, it could be the end of my career. If I have her behind a closed door in an office, people can talk about me and maybe say that I'm coming on to her, and something that I say could be taken out of context. If I open the door, something can be taken out of context. If I take her out for dinner so that we don't have use office time, then I could be said I'm dating her or something along those lines. If she cries and I hold her hand to comfort her, you know, that somebody takes a picture of that with their iPhone, my career is over. And so, you know, women will often say, and I've seen this, there's a wonderful presentation that I think it's wonderful that I did to Bell Labs online. And I asked, and the women were complaining that, you know, that men don't attend these types of functions with, you know, caring about human relationships and stuff. And we want to hear what men have to say. And there was a few men in the audience, only a handful. And one of the men stood up and spoke about how he felt and how he felt left out and how he felt vulnerable like this. And the women ripped him apart. And did he speak up again after that? Obviously not. And when somebody speaks up about another sexist perspective, they will, about their own perspective, if they're a male, they will be almost invariably attacked. I went from speaking at 50 universities and colleges per year when I was on the board of NOW. And when I started speaking up about boys' issues and fathers' issues and men's issues and also the importance of children having their father, I went from, NOW dropped its support of me. I went from 50 speaking engagements per year down to 0. I knew that it would cost me approximately $10 million of lifetime income. But I had the ability to be able to have integrity to say, men are hurting in this way. You go to any marketing person on almost any clothing product, or and a great many of the decisions about what is to be bought around the house, the refrigerator, the stove, the tea, and so on. And you will find that the marketing is slanted toward the people most likely to buy it. And there's also another subtle level of marketing too. If you talk to, so we have a home in Marin County in Mill Valley, and we have 2 fireplaces. And any real estate person will tell you, you know, oh, it's really good to have a fireplace because women love fireplaces. And also women love, you know, the way the kitchen looks and is extremely important because women care a great deal about the kitchen there. And so then you ask a real estate person, and just try this, ask any real estate person, whose opinions are more important, the females or the males' opinions in buying the house? And almost every real estate person will say, I haven't even heard a single exception to this rule in the United States, will say, oh, definitely the women's. And it usually won't even be, they don't even have to sort of miss a beat in that. So here's a purchase. You know, maybe in an urban area or a nice area, it's $1 million purchase or £1 million purchase. The biggest purchase you make in your lifetime, probably. And so many men feel that they're working very hard to be able to buy the type of home that a woman wants, with the type of kitchen she wants, with the type of amenities that she wants, and we're trying to please a woman. And so, as I mentioned before, when we work our rears off and die 6 or so years sooner to please a woman, that doesn't bother most men. But what does bother most men is being called a person of male privilege, male power, a male oppressor, a part of the patriarchy when we do it well, and a loser, or just plain ignored when we don't do it well. We feel caught between a rock and a hard place, and that's what creates the incels, who are not just saying, "I don't want women." The word incel means involuntarily celibate, which means I want to be involved with a woman. For example, in China, the dating sites these are the largest number. The dating sites in China are the largest, have the largest population of any place in the world. And in analyses of the largest dating site in China, they found that women want men who have homes and have cars, but only 8% of the people on the website the men have homes and cars. They, of course, also want men who are usually a little taller and men who are good looking. So we're now down to 8%, and the fraction of 8% that are taller and are good looking. And so we're maybe down to 3 or 4%, depending on how you define taller and good looking. And so as you pointed out a little while ago, all these women are competing for this 3 or 4 or 5% of men. And that means that 96, 97% of men are left out of being desired. So they're either settled for or ignored. Here's what I think is an accurate understanding of this. Yes, there is on sites of incels and MGTOW, men going their own way, there are misogynist, what I would call misogynist comments, and what I know every feminist friend of mine would agree with are misogynist comments. So let's just acknowledge that, and then move to 2 very important things. Go to a cafe at some point when the cafes are back open again, and listen to a group of women talk about their husbands, about their boyfriends, about their exes. And you will hear misandry all over the place. He's a typical man. He did this. He was such an a-hole. He's such a jackass. On and on, you'll hear negative things about he's a typical man. This is so ingrained in our culture that even the title of one of my books, Why Men Are the Way They Are, is an anti-male title. It is why men are the way they are, which is objectifying the men. But I needed to do a title like that because women think about, oh, the way they are, and there is an objectification in that. I just happened to rip out of the paper yesterday from the New York Times this headline. I'll read it because it may be hard to read here. They opened fire on everybody. Suspected militants kill 100 civilians in Niger. Okay, everybody and civilians. Turns out to be they only killed men and boys. It was never mentioned either in the headline or the subheadline that everybody was just men and just boys, and civilians were just men and just boys. We have so much implicit sexism of discarding the disposability of men that is around, that is therefore a type of misandry, not acknowledging the pain and the suffering of men. And so the putting down of men that I see among women in just everyday conversation that I hear with my own ears among women in everyday conversation is filled with misandry. However, why do women do that? They do that to process feelings, so they can go home to their husbands or their boyfriends, or or be heard about the anger they had toward their ex and what he or she is doing. Sometimes women go on too long that way, and they just fill themselves with anger forever. But no one says, you're a misandrist for talking that way, and you're saying all men this or all men that. Women support women in being angry. And not only do they support them in being angry by not calling them misandrists, they feel pressure to contribute their own story of a terrible man that helps that woman feel supported about how terrible the men are. Now, here's what's happened with incel. People like Paul Elam with Voice for Men and other groups have created sites like Voice for Men and MGTOW sites and incel sites, and gotten many of these men together, and they've been able to replicate a little bit of what women do just automatically from their social training. And so they do go through a period of complaining and playing victim and that type of thing, and things that would be called misogyny. And then Paul Elam just told me the day before yesterday that in groups like this, these men are eventually channeled to do something positive, to stop playing victim, to think about what their next step can be, to think about what was their own responsibility in the process of breaking up that relationship. Men are actually very quick to acknowledge, like, I'm just not as emotionally intelligent as my wife is, or I said this too loud, or I shouted when I should have not shouted. And in men's groups, it is not very masculine to complain. Masculinity and complaining are on the opposite ends of the spectrum. Femininity and complaining are aligned for this reason. When a woman complained about something, she discovered two things: who was interested in solving her complaint and who was capable of solving her complaint. The history of biology of women is that when women show vulnerability, they attract men who compete to be their saviors. The whole women's movement was about women showing vulnerability. I feel like we don't get equal pay for equal work. I feel like men come on to us as sexual harassment, there's date rape and so on. And men, politicians, and as well as other women, men and women will agree to one thing. When women have a problem, they'll all compete to solve the problem. When men have a problem, everyone competes to not acknowledge it. Victim feminism is undermining women. Victim feminism of women say, so in the United States, I live in California, and in California it is law that if a boy or girl go to college and the boy reaches out to the male, let's say, reaches out to the female, then she's already accepted a date from him, and the two of them are out together and they've never held hands, and he reaches over to hold her hand, and she, from that point on, can sue him for sexual harassment because he didn't first ask her, was it okay to hold your hand, and get a verbal agreement from her that, yes, you may hold my hand. Now, 99.9% of women would not make that accusation. But if the relationship breaks up and he rejects her, she can go back to that possibility and say, I was a victim of sexual harassment. And so tens of thousands of males in the United States have been told that they were perpetrators of sexual harassment. And there's thousands and thousands of lawsuits that the Office of Civil Rights has received about violations of our laws, saying that there cannot be discrimination based on sex because when these males are put up for trial, they're not put up for trial in the standard courts. They're put up for trial inside the university. And inside the university, they do not have to have due process. That is, there's no right on the part of the male who's been accused of being a sexual harasser to cross-examine or ask questions of the female who's accused him. There's often no right on the part of the lawyer to ask the female who's accused him. So the female is protected and the male isn't, which is a violation of due process. Now, this is part of the type of thing that has created so much anger about what is called woke culture or cancel culture or political correctness that has led to the election of Trump. That so many people feel like it's gone too far. And so the Democrats have been hanging other Democrats by their own petard because it's just, many people who are trying to empathize with feminist positions say it's just gone too far. And my own son is being accused of something and he doesn't have the right to defend himself. Now he has this on his record for the rest of his life. He's kicked out of the school. Other schools won't accept him for this. And so we have tens of thousands of male and female parents, including many feminist parents of sons, saying, whoa, what had a lot of value to it, that is understanding when men press things too far, has now gone too far the other way, A. And B, the question nobody is asking, why aren't we training our daughters to say no and say to the boy or man, I've said no, but if I change my mind and I'm interested, I'll take responsibility to come back and hold your hand. I'll take responsibility of kissing you. I'll take a responsibility of moving the kiss from the lips to the tongue. We're not training our daughters to really have respect and to really have power by sharing the responsibilities for sexual rejection. And until we do that, there will be men competing to be women's heroes, which will only be keeping men in their traditional male roles and only keeping women in their traditional victim roles. So the next evolutionary step of female empowerment is sharing responsibility and increasing the respect people have for you by being responsible and accountable, rather than the fear that men have of you for potentially being able to turn on them at any time with an accusation that has two sides to it, but only one side is allowed to be aired. You see the anger, but I beg you to understand that with both men and women, when I see anger, I have learned that anger is vulnerability's mask. And if you look for the vulnerability, you will find it and have empathy and hear the person who's angry rather than blaming them for being angry. I think what Laura Bates does is miss the entire purpose of human relationships, which is to communicate with each other, to understand each other, to hear that everybody has a different life experience, that our job is to not go into schools and say, oh my God, I'm so terrified, people are actually disagreeing with me, but rather that your job, if you're going into schools where the purpose of a school at every single level is to provoke curiosity, is to facilitate perspectives, to have every single person in that classroom hear everybody else in that classroom without interrupting them, making sure that each person who speaks is heard. So if she wants to be a good facilitator of real progress in humankind, and understanding that with men and women, the great majority of them live in the same family boat. And if one sex wins, both sexes lose. There's no such thing as one sex winning alone. Our job is to, when a man tells me, my wife got it, I think I won that argument, I say, you lost. because there's no such thing as winning an argument in a relationship. Your job is not to win an argument. Your job is to hear, to share your feelings and your hurts and your pains, but also hear your partner's hurts and pains. And I'm afraid that when Laura Bates goes into a classroom and she expects agreement and she takes disagreement and she translates that into this is going to lead to misogyny, or this is going to lead to terrible things. No, what will lead to misogyny is exactly what Laura Bates is doing, which is discarding everything men feel and fear and just focusing on what women feel and fear. That sends men into their cave. Do we have in the men's movement men who are angry? Yes. Do we have men who are sometimes dangerous? Yes. Do we have in the women's movement women who were angry and dangerous? Absolutely. We had, for example, in the women's movement, Valerie Solanas. Valerie Solanas wrote a book with a very gentle title. It was called The Scum Manifesto. Scum stood for Society for Cutting Up Men. And this wasn't just a book with words. She then took a gun and shot Andy Warhol. She ended, for all practical purposes, killed Andy Warhol's productive career. He was never productive after recovering from those wounds. Now, we had a choice. We could pay attention to Valerie Solanas and say, oh, everything women say is just leading to the type of anger of the Scum Manifesto. And look, that anger has actually manifested in Valerie Solanas killing a man who was did not do anything to harm her and was not self-defense in any way, shape, or form. This is what it's leading to. And I could write a book, talking about when women speak up and they get angry, we shouldn't listen. They're part of the womanosphere, and they're all misandrous, which we don't even have a word for until recently. Misandry is the same thing against men as misogyny is against women. And while this audience hears that, it was only 5 or 6 years ago that the Webster's Dictionary even had misandry in there. So the claims of misogyny are so great that it's a wall that women have put around, or not women, because many women are open and want to be heard and want to hear. And I have as many women as men in my couples communication workshops. They want to hear just like men want to hear. But when you talk about misogyny, as soon as somebody says something that you disagree with, you are creating misogyny. You're creating somebody who has less respect for you. We have respect for people who are not defensive, who are able to hear. And that's what we have to aim our future toward, making sure we support men and women hearing each other.
Can't you see it too? There's an elephant in the room.
The Glass Blind Spot is brought to you by you, because it's your views, your likes and your comments that keep this show on the road.